Jason Statham denied service at a fancy restaurant, but what he did next left the whole city stunned. From rejection to redemption, watch how one quiet act of kindness sparked a movement that's changing lives across the country. Like, subscribe, and drop a comment with your thoughts on this powerful true story. It was a crisp afternoon in downtown Los Angeles. The kind of afternoon where the sun hangs low but stubborn in the sky, casting golden light through the modern steel and glass buildings while the sidewalks fill with a late lunch crowd. People in tailored suits and sleek sunglasses brushed past one another, eyes on phones, minds on meetings. Among them, a man walked alone, hands tucked casually into the pockets of his dark, lightweight jacket, unmistakable to anyone who caught a second glance, if they dared look twice. He carried himself with quiet confidence, exuding the kind of calm control only years of discipline could teach. It was Jason Statham. The actor wasn't filming today. No red carpets or press interviews. Just a rare, quiet day off. He just finished a grueling 3-month shoot for a new action thriller, and now he was doing what many in Hollywood forget to do: living life like a normal person. No entourage, no assistants buzzing behind him. Just a man craving a good meal after a long morning walk through the city. He strolled past a row of upscale restaurants tucked under the shade of eucalyptus trees until his eyes landed on a small, elegant bistro with a vintage French sign above the door. La Lumiere. It wasn't flashy. No velvet ropes, no roaring paparazzi. Just simple elegance. The kind of place that whispered class rather than screamed it. Jason smiled. Perfect. He stepped through the door, where the soft chime of a bell rang overhead. Inside, the atmosphere was warm, cream-colored walls, dark wood floors, and gentle jazz music playing low. The smell of roasted duck and truffle oil lingered in the air. A few heads turned in mild recognition, but no one made a fuss. Jason liked it that way. A young hostess greeted him at the podium, a polite smile on her face, though her eyes hesitated for half a second as she took him in. She glanced behind her toward the dining room, then looked back at Jason, her smile faltering slightly. "Good afternoon, sir. Do you have a reservation?" Jason shook his head gently. "No reservation. Thought I'd take a chance. Just one if you've got room." The hostess blinked, unsure. "Just a moment, please." She walked briskly into the back, where Jason could hear murmured voices. He waited, arms still tucked in his pockets, his stance relaxed. When she returned, the smile on her face was more strained. "I'm sorry, but we're actually fully booked for the afternoon." Jason raised a brow just a little. He glanced at the nearly half-empty dining room. Several tables were unoccupied. He looked back at her calmly, not accusingly. "Really?" She hesitated. "Yes, we have a lot of reservations coming in soon. It's just, unfortunately, not possible to seat anyone without a booking." Jason didn't argue. He didn't press. He didn't even ask for the manager. He just nodded once. "All right," he said quietly. "Thanks anyway." But as he turned to leave, something in the air shifted. A man seated near the bar leaned into his date and said, loud enough for Jason to hear, "Guess even Hollywood's finest need reservations like the rest of us. Or maybe he's just not the right kind of customer for this place." Jason heard it. The words weren't subtle. They were laced with judgment, with the smugness of someone trying to make himself feel big by making someone else feel small. He could have turned around, could have responded, could have reminded the man that the Hollywood finest didn't often go around name-dropping themselves for tables. But he didn't. He walked out. The bell chimed again behind him, and the door closed. But outside, Jason paused. He stood still on the sidewalk, the sun hitting the crown of his shaved head. And he thought, not about the insult, not about his ego, not even about the humiliation, but about something much deeper. This wasn't about a table, or a restaurant, or a petty man whispering judgments from a leather seat. It was about how we treat people. He glanced back once through the front window. The hostess was talking to another guest now, smiling much more brightly. The man at the bar was sipping his wine, laughing. Jason took a slow breath and turned to walk away, but not in the direction he'd come. Instead, he walked 2 blocks east into a different part of the neighborhood, less polished, more real. The sidewalks had cracks, and the storefronts weren't quite as Instagram-worthy. But the people smiled more openly The smells drifting out of kitchens felt more like home, and the tension in the air was gone. A block later, Jason stopped in front of a modest diner. Rosie's. The sign above the door was hand-painted, chipped at the edges. Inside, the place looked like it hadn't been renovated since the 70s. Vinyl booths, spinning bar stools, a chalkboard menu. He stepped in. A bell chimed. This time, a middle-aged woman with thick glasses and a worn apron looked up from behind the counter and smiled as if she'd just seen her favorite nephew. "Well, look what the cat dragged in," she said, waving him in. "Sit anywhere you like, honey." Jason smiled, genuinely this time, and took a seat at the counter. "No reservation?" she teased. He chuckled. "Hope that's all right. For you? I'll make room on the grill if I have to." She poured him a cup of coffee before he could ask. "You look like you've had a rough morning." Jason didn't answer right away. He looked around at the room. Families. An old couple sharing a milkshake. A few construction workers finishing late breakfasts. No pretension. No approval needed. Then he looked back at her. "I got turned away from a place up the street." She rolled her eyes. "One of those places with more forks than food." "Something like that." "Well, they missed out." She leaned in slightly, voice softer now. "You know, you'd be surprised how many people judge a man by his jacket or his boots. But real kindness isn't about polished floors or wine lists. It's about how you make people feel when they walk in the room." Jason stared at her for a moment, then nodded. "Yeah," he said. "You're right." She patted the counter. "Now, what can I get you?" "Our chicken pot pie will change your religion." Jason laughed out loud. But that was only the beginning. What happened next in Rosie's, what Jason did over the next few hours, would ripple far beyond the walls of that little diner. Because while some people flex power by showing who they can exclude, Jason Statham was about to remind everyone what true power looked like when it was used to lift others. Jason didn't rush his meal. He sat at the counter with that first cup of coffee warming his hands while the kitchen behind Rosie crackled with life. Pans clanking, steam hissing, and the low hum of old-school soul music seeping through a dusty speaker above the register. There was something honest about the place. The kind of environment that didn't need to impress you because it already knew who it was. And for someone like Jason, who had spent 2 decades swimming through a sea of polished smiles and curated attention, this simplicity felt like a breath of fresh air. Rosie returned with a slice of pie the size of his forearm, steam rising from its golden crust. "Try that," she said, sliding it in front of him. "And don't insult me by leaving a crumb." Jason gave her a sideways grin and picked up his fork. "You run this place by yourself?" "My husband, Bobby, and I did for 33 years. He passed 5 years ago." She paused, her hand brushing her apron like she was wiping something off. Heart gave out just like that. But I wasn't about to let his dream go under. So now it's just me and the kids he hired before he passed. Family, more or less. Jason paused, fork midair. "That's tough, but beautiful." Rosie nodded, brushing the compliment aside with practiced humility. "We've got a good crowd. Not always big spenders, but solid folks. Truckers, teachers, that sort. Some can't always pay. We find ways to work around it." Jason chewed slowly. She wasn't fishing for sympathy. She wasn't trying to impress him. She was just sharing truth the way some people share coffee, poured warm without asking. After a while, more customers came in. Rosie floated between booths and tables like a one-woman orchestra, taking orders, refilling drinks, cracking jokes. She even shooed Jason off the counter when an elderly man with a cane needed the stool more than he did. Jason didn't mind. He moved to a corner booth and kept watching. That's when it happened. A young woman walked in. She looked no older than 20. Pale, skinny, face smudged with fatigue. Her coat was 2 sizes too big, the sleeves fraying, and her eyes, those haunted, weary eyes, told a story without a word. She moved carefully, like she didn't want to take up space she hadn't earned. Jason watched Rosie spot her from across the room. Her body didn't stiffen. Her tone didn't change. She smiled, warm and wide, and pointed to a booth. "Sit yourself down, sweetheart," she called. "I'll be right over." The girl hesitated. I don't have any." Rosie didn't let her finish. "You sit. Let me worry about the rest." The girl lowered her head and slid into the booth, shoulders curling inward like she was afraid someone would call her out. Rosie brought her water, then disappeared into the kitchen. Jason leaned forward, his instincts kicking in. Not the actor in him, the human. When Rosie returned to the counter, Jason stood and met her there. "Does that happen often?" he asked quietly, tilting his head toward the booth. Rosie didn't even look. "More than you'd think. City's rougher than it lets on. Rent goes up, jobs go down, and folks get chewed up and spit out without a single damn warning. You feed people who can't pay?" Rosie shrugged. "Bobby used to say, God didn't give us full bellies so we could watch others starve. I'm just honoring that." Jason looked at her, something stirring beneath his calm surface. He pulled his wallet from his coat and slid out a few bills. Rosie waved her hands. No, your meal's on the house. This isn't for me." He folded the bills and pressed them in her palm, several hundred, maybe more. "For her, and the next one's like her." Rosie's eyes widened, hands closing reflexively around the money. That's kind of you. Real kind." Jason didn't reply. Instead, he asked a question he hadn't asked in years. "What does this place need?" She tilted her head. "What do you mean? To thrive? To do more of what you're already doing. Not just survive, but grow. Feed more people." "How more people?" Rosie blinked, unsure how to respond. "Well, we used to do community dinners. Back before the pandemic. Free meals for anyone who needed. Volunteers, music, all that. But with costs now, can't afford it." Jason tapped the counter softly, thinking, "What if you could again?" She laughed, light and tired. "What are you suggesting? You planning to throw a fundraiser or something?" But Jason wasn't joking. And when he looked at her, it wasn't with the smugness of someone offering charity. It was the gaze of a man who had been poor once, who knew the taste of struggle, who remembered his mother skipping meals just to keep the gas running in the winter. "I'm suggesting you do one again, this weekend, and let me handle the rest." Rosie stared, blinking behind her glasses. "Jason, I can't." "You can. You will. I'll cover the food, get the word out. You just open the doors. Let people come." The counter went quiet. Even the clink of forks from the other booths seemed to pause. Rosie put her hand over her heart, shaking her head in disbelief. "I don't even know what to say." "Then don't," he said simply. "Just say yes." And she did. Over the next 2 hours, Jason stayed. Not because he needed the thanks, not because he wanted recognition, but because he wanted to be useful. He helped sweep floors. He helped carry boxes from the pantry. He even peeled potatoes in the back, though Rosie had to show him how to do it properly. Word began to spread. Rosie made a call to her son, who ran the local hardware store. Jason made a call to a friend in marketing. Flyers were designed. A social post went viral by the end of the day. Community hero helps small diner feed hundreds. But Jason didn't stick around for the online praise. By sundown, he'd slipped out quietly, leaving behind nothing but a promise to return on Saturday. What none of them knew was that the upcoming weekend would bring in far more than the neighborhood regulars. News cameras, reporters, local officials, dozens of volunteers, and a few unexpected guests who would redefine how the city viewed that little diner forever. But at that moment, in that quiet booth where a hungry young woman sipped warm soup and fought back tears, Jason realized something. Sometimes, the greatest scenes don't happen on film. They happen in silence, with no audience. And the people who perform in them, they don't need applause. Saturday came faster than anyone expected. Rosie's Diner, normally a humble, quiet space with a gentle clatter of coffee cups and the smell of bacon in the air, transformed into something else entirely. By 9 a.m., the line outside curved down the block. Some wore old jackets, some had strollers, others stood with empty hands and hopeful eyes. But they all had one thing in common. They were there because someone told them Rosie was feeding the whole city for free. Jason arrived early, dressed in jeans and a simple black hoodie, face mostly hidden under a baseball cap. Despite that, word had gotten out. A few people recognized him. One man said, "Aren't you?" And Jason simply replied, "Just here to help." And help he did. Rosie had planned for maybe 100 people. 300 showed up before noon. Jason had anticipated that. He had arranged for a local caterer, 2 food trucks, and even an ice cream cart to set up shop in the empty lot behind the diner, all on his dime. There were folding chairs, speakers playing Marvin Gaye and Al Green, and a couple of tents offering clothes and toiletries for those who needed them. Every detail had been thought through, not by a team of Hollywood planners, but by Jason himself. Quietly, thoughtfully, intentionally. Rosie, wide-eyed and overwhelmed, looked around at the scene like she was standing in someone else's dream. This is not what I expected, she said, breathless. Jason grinned as he carried a tray of cornbread out to a table. Good. By noon, the crowd had swelled to nearly 500. And just when Rosie thought the day couldn't get any more surreal, a sleek black SUV pulled up and out stepped someone she hadn't seen in 30 years. Maya Fletcher. Rosie gasped. Oh my lord. Maya was a former server at the diner. Back when Rosie and Bobby first opened. She'd been just a teenager, working part-time after school. Quiet, polite, smart. But she'd left the city after college, chasing dreams of politics. Rosie had followed her career from afar. City council, then state assemblywoman. Now, Maya was the deputy mayor of Los Angeles. She strode up in heels that clicked on the pavement like punctuation marks, a warm, open smile on her face. I heard a rumor that Rosie Daniels was feeding half of East LA today. Thought I'd see it with my own eyes. Rosie embraced her, stunned. You're still as sharp as ever. Sharper, I hope, Maya said, glancing around. This is incredible. All of this, you organized it. Rosie shook her head and pointed subtly at Jason, who was hauling a crate of water bottles toward the back of the lot. He did. Jason Statham. You know, the actor. He came in earlier this week. Got turned away from one of those swanky restaurants up on Fairmont. Maya raised her eyebrows. Turned away? Rosie nodded. And instead of getting mad or walking off like a diva, he walked in here. Ate a pie. Watched me feed a girl who couldn't afford toast. And then he said, let's do something. And we did. Maya turned to look at Jason, who was now crouched beside an elderly man, tying a loose shoelace for him like he'd done it 100 times. He could have posted something online, Maya murmured. Could have made a scene. Could have called the owner of that restaurant and made headlines. He didn't, Rosie said. He showed up. He keeps showing up. Later that day, Maya would return to City Hall and quietly authorize a grant for small businesses offering free meals and community services in underserved neighborhoods. And she would name it the Rosie Fund. But in that moment, she just watched. At 1 p.m., a local reporter from Channel 9 News arrived, camera person in tow, expecting a few sound bites and maybe a glimpse of a celebrity. What they found was a cultural event. Jason tried to stay out of frame, ducking behind coolers and avoiding any real interviews, but eventually, Rosie pulled him into one, gently. The reporter, a young guy with glasses too big for his face, asked, Mr. Statham, this is not the kind of thing we usually see from big Hollywood actors. Why do this? Why here? Jason hesitated, looked at Rosie, then looked at the camera. Because kindness doesn't need a spotlight, and you don't have to wear a suit or hold a title to treat people with dignity. He paused, then added, I played tough guys on screen for years. But real strength? It's in showing up when it's not glamorous, in staying when nobody's watching, in lifting someone else without expecting them to remember your name. The segment aired that evening. The video exploded online. Tens of thousands of comments poured in. This is the kind of hero we need. I cried watching this. That's what a man looks like. Where's this restaurant? I'm going there next week. By the end of the night, Rosie's Diner had gained 20,000 new followers on Instagram. She didn't even have an Instagram account before that day. A young volunteer made it for her. But the most important moments weren't caught on camera. Like when Jason slipped an envelope into the backpack of a homeless veteran without a word. Or when he crouched down to draw smiley faces with a little boy using sidewalk chalk. Or when he sat beside the young woman from earlier that week. The one who'd been too afraid to ask for food and said simply, you matter. She cried in his arms. Not because he was famous, but because someone finally saw her. By sunset, the lot had quieted. The food trucks packed up. Tables were folded. The last few guests waved goodbye as Rosie stood near the counter inside, her hands still shaking with disbelief. Jason, now wiping a counter with a rag, looked up. Well, she exhaled. I think Bobby would be proud. Jason nodded. Then, just as he was about to leave, something caught his eye through the front window. A young couple, both in tailored outfits, were approaching the door. Behind them stood the smug man from the high-end restaurant. Jason recognized him immediately. Same smirk, same shallow eyes, except now he looked surprised. He stepped into the diner, looked around, and locked eyes with Jason. "I heard what you did here today," he said. Jason said nothing. The man hesitated. "That place on Fairmont, we made a mistake." Rosie crossed her arms. "No, you didn't. You made a choice." Jason walked toward the man and held out his hand. "Maybe now you can make a better one." The man took it, shame written across his face. Outside, the sky turned orange. Street lights flickered on. Rosie turned the sign on the door from open to closed. But Jason knew this wasn't the end, because what started as one man being turned away was becoming something far, far bigger. The following week was unlike anything Rosie or Jason had ever experienced. It started with a trickle. A few more customers than usual on Monday. Some locals from nearby neighborhoods who had seen the news and just wanted to try the food from the place where Jason Statham served mashed potatoes. Rosie chuckled at that one. By Tuesday, the trickle became a steady stream. A man drove in from Riverside with his 2 kids and handed Rosie a check for $500. "You fed my brother last year when he was homeless," he said quietly. "I didn't know until I saw the video. I just wanted to say thank you." On Wednesday, a group of college students offered to repaint the outside of the diner, free of charge. They brought rollers, paint, even scaffolding. One of them, a young woman named Danny, had tears in her eyes when she told Rosie, "My parents ate here after they lost their house in 2009. You let them sit here for hours and never once made them feel like a burden." The diner gleamed by the end of the day. Fresh paint, clean windows, but even more than that, it gleamed with something deeper, purpose. Jason returned quietly that Friday. He didn't make an announcement. He didn't bring a film crew or ask for media coverage. He just walked in, took his usual seat at the counter, and asked Rosie, "Got any of that pot pie left?" She smiled. "Only the corner pieces." "Good. I like the crust." As he ate, a soft silence settled between them. Comfortable, familiar. Outside, more people lined up, not for a free meal, but to volunteer. Rosie had to create a list. She even had a waiting list for the waiting list. Jason leaned back in his seat. "So what's next?" Rosie looked up from her clipboard, pin tucked behind her ear. "Next? This isn't over," he said. "It can't be. This is bigger than a one-day meal. You built something here, Rosie. Something real." Rosie sighed. "You say that like it's easy." "I don't think it's easy," he said, "but I think it's necessary." She set the clipboard down and leaned on the counter. "I don't have the staff, Jason. I don't have the time, the money. I'm 64 years old. My knees hurt. My hands go numb when I peel too many potatoes. I'm doing the best I can." Jason nodded. "I know." Then he pulled something from his coat pocket and set it gently on the counter. A folder. Thick. Rosie opened it. Inside, legal paperwork, a business proposal, letters of support from donors, a bank account pre-funded with $50,000 under the name Rosie's Foundation for Community Kitchens. "I've been working on it all week," Jason said, almost sheepish. "You'll stay the owner. But the foundation handles the money, the volunteers, the legal stuff. You just do what you do best. Feed people and make them feel human." Rosie blinked hard. You set all this up?" He smiled. "Had some help. But yeah." Her hands trembled as she closed the folder. "Jason, this is..." "I know." She wiped her eyes. "You could have gone to a dozen places after they turned you away. You could have eaten steak at a 5-star resort, had sushi flown in from Tokyo." Jason shrugged. "I just wanted some pot pie." But she knew better. So did he. Word of the foundation spread quickly. Within 72 hours, Rosie's Diner was contacted by 6 other local restaurants who wanted to join the initiative. A retired chef offered to donate his time teaching cooking classes for single parents. A local farm pledged a weekly supply of fresh produce. An elementary school started a fundraiser called Lunch with Rosie, where students would collect spare change to support free meals for kids. But none of it compared to what happened the following Monday. Rosie was setting up chairs in the back for a meeting with the new volunteers when a small group of people walked in. At first, she didn't recognize them. Then she did. It was the entire staff of the upscale bistro that had denied Jason service. The hostess, the manager, even the smug man who had made that cutting comment at the bar. They stood awkwardly at the entrance, all dressed in street clothes. Not uniforms, no brand names. Rosie folded her arms. "Can I help you?" The manager, mid-40s, salt and pepper hair, eyes weary, stepped forward. "We came to apologize." Jason emerged from the kitchen, wiping his hands on a towel. He looked at them, then looked at Rosie. "We saw the news," the manager said. "And more than that, we saw what we missed. We judged someone based on assumptions. And we forgot that hospitality isn't about prestige, it's about people." Jason said nothing. The man swallowed. "We're not asking for forgiveness, but we are asking for a second chance. We'd like to offer our time, our kitchen, our staff, once a month, however you need us." Rosie looked at Jason. He gave her a small nod, but didn't speak for her. She studied the group. The young hostess from that day looked like she'd been crying before she walked in. Finally, Rosie said, "You want a second chance? Start by setting up those folding tables." They got to work. Later that evening, after the last light had faded from the sky, Rosie sat in her office behind the diner. Her knees hurt, her feet throbbed, but her heart was fuller than it had ever been. Jason knocked on the door and poked his head in. "You all right?" She smiled. "Better than all right. Just trying to take it all in." He stepped inside and sat across from her. For a few moments, they said nothing. Then she asked, "Why did you come here that day? Of all places?" Jason thought for a moment. "Because I was tired of pretending," he said. "Tired of the noise, the roles, the empty smiles. I wanted something real, something quiet, something human." Rosie smiled. "Well, you found it." Jason looked down at his hands. "I think we built it." They shared a quiet laugh. Then Rosie leaned forward. "You ever think about what would have happened if they hadn't turned you away that day?" Jason paused. "Yeah," he said. "Sometimes. But you know what? I'm glad they did." "Why?" "Because if they hadn't shut the door, I never would have found this one." She reached across the desk and patted his hand. "And now?" she asked. Jason smiled. "Now we open more." Spring melted into summer. What began as a single, spontaneous act of kindness inside an old-school diner on a forgotten corner of East LA turned into a full-fledged movement. And like most genuine movements, it wasn't orchestrated by committees or launched by press releases. It was whispered from one person to another, felt in the soul before it was understood in the mind. And it all stemmed from one man quietly being told, "We don't have a table for you." Rosie's foundation for community kitchens expanded faster than anyone expected. By July, 6 other small restaurants across the city had joined the cause, each committing to monthly open tables. No questions asked, no bills handed out. The slogan, pinned by Jason himself on the back of a coffee-stained napkin, became the banner of the movement. Dignity is served here. Simple, human, unforgettable. Jason refused to take credit. In every interview he reluctantly gave, he deflected praise toward Rosie and the volunteers. "I just showed up," he'd say. "Rosie's been doing this long, before I ever walked through that door." But his actions said otherwise. He kept showing up, quietly, consistently. He'd sweep floors before opening, bus tables during lunch rushes, drive crates of donated vegetables from farmers markets across town. He paid for dishwashers' dental work and bought new ovens for 3 struggling kitchens. Always anonymously, always insisting Rosie take the thanks. He said no to 2 acting projects during that time. One of them a franchise sequel that would have paid him 8 figures. When his agent called, incredulous, Jason simply said, "I've got something more important going on right now." The agent didn't understand, but Rosie did, because by now, Jason wasn't just a celebrity passing through. He had become part of the city's soul, a thread in a fabric that had been tattered by poverty, frayed by division, but never truly torn apart. People were waking up, watching, helping, giving, and the stories, oh, the stories. A high school dropout who once cleaned plates at Rosie's was given a scholarship by a donor who'd seen his poem taped to the back of the pantry door. A single father, once homeless, now ran logistics for 3 of the foundation's kitchens. His daughter, age 9, handed out lemonade every Saturday, and told guests, "My daddy's a hero." A food critic from the Los Angeles Times, once a champion of Michelin stars and foie gras, wrote a front-page editorial titled, "The best meal I had this year was free, and it changed my life." But perhaps the most moving story came quietly one Wednesday afternoon. Jason was restocking shelves in the diner's storage closet when a familiar voice floated in from the front. "Excuse me, is Jason here?" He stepped out, wiping his hands on a towel, and his eyes landed on her. It was the young woman, the same one from that first day, the one who had hesitated at the door, coat 2 sizes too big, hunger written in every line of her face. But she looked different now, stronger, healthier. She wore a simple blouse and carried a leather-bound folder pressed to her chest. Jason stepped forward. "Hey," she smiled. "Hi." He waited, gave her the space. "I got a job," she said, voice trembling. "2 weeks ago. Stable hours. Benefits. And I'm signing a lease tomorrow. It's not fancy, but it's mine." Jason's eyes softened. "That's incredible." She opened the folder. Inside was a single sheet of paper. Typed. "Neat. I wrote something," she said. "About that day. About you. About Rosie. I'm submitting it to a community journal, but I wanted you to have it first." Jason took the paper carefully, like it was made of glass. She paused. "You know, you didn't save me. Not exactly. You reminded me I was worth saving." He looked up throat tight. "That's more than I could ever ask for." She smiled, nodded, and left. Jason sat down in the booth, where she had once curled up like a ghost trying not to be seen. Now, the ghost had become light, a living, breathing beam of it. He read her words in silence. And when Rosie sat across from him minutes later, refilling his coffee, she asked gently, "That her?" He nodded. "Good," she said. "That's the point of all this. Not just feeding people, but restoring them, giving them back to themselves." Jason looked around the diner. The new bulletin board covered in job postings and rental leads. The calendar of open table nights hosted by volunteers. The basket of free books in the corner. The laughter at every table. Then he looked at Rosie. "You ever think about franchising?" he joked. She laughed, deep, full. "Only if you do the driving." But they both knew they wouldn't need to, because others were already picking up the torch. Within the year, Rosie's model expanded to San Diego, Oakland, and even Chicago. Local restaurants in other cities began adopting the "dignity is served here" model. The phrase appeared on stickers, t-shirts, aprons. A documentary crew followed Rosie and Jason for 6 months. When it premiered at Sundance, there wasn't a dry eye in the room. But Jason didn't go to the premiere. He was in the kitchen, back in L.A., helping a shy teenage boy from the foster system learn how to flip pancakes. Rosie peeked in and said, "You know they're giving you an award tonight." Jason didn't look up. "I've got all the reward I need right here." And that was the truth. For all the explosions he'd run from, for all the villains he'd fought on screen, for all the impossible stunts and Hollywood glitz, it was here, in a quiet diner with peeling linoleum and the best damn pot pie in the city, that Jason Statham became a real-life hero. Not with fists, not with fame, but with grace. And the world noticed. One denied table became 1,000 open doors. One insult sparked 1,000 acts of compassion. One quiet man walked away from ego and into purpose. And that shocked everyone. But it saved even more. Forever.